Let me tell you something, the weather agencies are not going to put in a headline. Not because they are hiding it, but because numbers on a slide never sound as dangerous as they actually are, and by the time people understand what those numbers really mean, the storm season is already halfway over. In May of 2026, NOAA released its official outlook for the Atlantic hurricane season, and here is what it said. 55% chance of a below-normal season, 35% chance of a near-normal season, and only 10% chance of an above-normal season. 8 to 14 named storms expected across the entire basin, 3 to 6 of those becoming hurricanes, 1 to 3 becoming major hurricanes, Category 3 or higher. For most people, that sounds like good news. It sounds like the kind of report you read once, feel a little relief, and move on with your day. Maybe you even mention it to someone. Did you hear? This year is supposed to be calmer. And then you close the tab and forget about it, because that is what a calming headline is designed to make you do. Only it already happened before, and the last time a season got called quiet, it still produced one of the strongest hurricanes ever recorded in the Atlantic. That storm was Melissa. It became one of the most powerful Atlantic hurricanes on record. It killed at least 93 people. It brought catastrophic flooding across the Caribbean, the kind that does not just damage a house, it erases entire streets, entire routines, entire lives that people spent decades building. And it did all of that in a season that was never flagged as unusually dangerous going in. Nobody was told to brace for the worst that year, and yet the worst still found a way in. So here is the real question. If you live near the coast, if you have family near the coast, if you have ever packed a bag at 2 in the morning because the wind outside sounded wrong, this is for you. Have you ever been through a hurricane yourself? Or do you live in one of those coastal areas that always seems to end up in the path? Tell me in the comments, I actually want to know. If this is the kind of story you want more of, hit like, help us reach the next goal, and subscribe so you do not miss what comes next, because this story is not finished yet, not even close. Now let's slow down and actually understand what below average is measuring, because it is not measuring what most people think it is measuring. Part of this year's forecast comes down to a climate pattern called El Niño. NOAA says there is an 82% probability that El Niño conditions establish by July of 2026. El Niño tends to increase wind shear across the Atlantic. Wind shear is basically wind blowing at different speeds and directions at different altitudes, and it tends to tear storms apart before they can organize into something massive. So historically, El Niño years do produce fewer hurricanes overall. That part of the science checks out. That part is not the problem. The problem is what people do with that comfort once they hear it. Here is the part that matters more than any percentage on a chart. Ken Graham, the director of the National Weather Service, said something that should stay in your mind long after this video ends. It only takes one storm to make it a bad season for you. Read that again, slowly. Not one bad season for the record books. One bad season for you, for your street, for your parents' house near the water, for the town where your kids go to school, for the small business you spent years building 3 blocks from the beach. Averages do not knock on doors. Storms do. Because a seasonal outlook is not a forecast of where or when a specific storm will hit land. NOAA has said this plainly. The outlook is not a landfall forecast. It tells you how many storms might form across the entire Atlantic basin over several months. It does not tell you if one of them turns toward your coastline in the 3rd week of September. It does not tell you if it strengthens overnight from a tropical storm into a monster while you're asleep, while the kids have school in the morning, while the fridge still has last week's groceries in it. Those two things, the seasonal number and your personal risk, are not the same conversation, even though they get flattened into the same headline, the same 30-second clip on the evening news. Let's put 2 versions of this side by side, because the contrast is where the real danger actually lives. Version 1 is the statistical model, and honestly it is not wrong. The math behind it is sound. Most seasons with an active El Niño really do produce fewer storms in total. If you zoom out and look at decades of data, the pattern holds up again and again. Meteorologists are not making this up to sound smart or to fill airtime. The probability is real, and in a purely mathematical sense, this season is more likely than not to be quieter than usual. If you wanted to bet on it, the odds favor a calmer year. Version 2 is the coastal community that hears below average and quietly lowers its guard. This is not about blaming anyone. It is human nature, plain and simple. When the news says calm, people plan for calm. Towns push back emergency drills to next year. Families skip restocking the storm kit this season, because last year's water bottles are probably still fine, the batteries are probably still good, why spend the money again? Local budgets shift funding away from preparation and toward other needs, because why spend heavily preparing for a season that is expected to be mild? It makes sense on paper. It makes sense in a budget meeting. It makes sense right up until it does not. And that is exactly the gap where one fast-moving, rapidly intensifying storm can walk straight through and catch an entire coastline off guard. Not because anyone was careless in the way we usually think about careless. Not because anyone ignored an obvious warning sign, but because the warning they were listening to was about a whole season, 6 months, dozens of possible storms spread across an entire ocean basin, and the storm that actually mattered to them was about 1 week, 1 night. One decision to evacuate early or wait just a little longer to see what happens. Now compare that to what happened with Typhoon Bavi, moving through Guam and the Northern Mariana Islands. That storm carried extreme intensity. On paper, it had every reason to produce a horrifying death toll, the kind of number that makes international news for weeks. Instead, the result was 0 deaths. 0. Not luck, preparation. Early warning taken seriously by officials and by regular families alike. Evacuations that happened before the wind picked up, not after the roof started peeling back. People who treated the threat as personal, not statistical, who did not wait for a headline to tell them how scared to be. That is the entire difference in one sentence. A season can be labeled quiet and still take lives if the people in the storm's path treat that label as permission to relax. Or a storm can be extreme, genuinely one of the most dangerous of its kind, and still cost nobody their life if the people in its path treat every single warning as if it applies directly to them, personally, immediately. So let's sit with the two numbers that actually tell this story, side by side, because seeing them together changes how they feel. 8 to 14 named storms. That is the number from the official report. It is abstract. It is statistical. It is the kind of number that calms a room down, that gets nodded at in a meeting and then filed away. 93 deaths from one single storm in a season that also was not supposed to be one of the worst. That is the number that should never leave your memory. It is not abstract at all. It is concrete. It has names attached to it. It has families attached to it. It has homes that are no longer standing, photo albums that are gone, front porches where people used to sit in the evening that simply are not there anymore. One number is about probability. The other is about people. And every single hurricane season, the gap between those two numbers is exactly where the real danger lives, quiet and patient, waiting for someone to look away first. Think about it this way for a second. Imagine you are told there is only a small chance of rain today, so you leave the umbrella at home. Most days, that gamble works out fine. But the one day it does not, you do not get a little bit wet. You get soaked to the bone on the walk home, cold, uncomfortable, wishing you had just grabbed the umbrella anyway, even though the odds were in your favor. Now stretch that same gamble across an entire coastline, across months, across Category 3 winds, and storm surge that can swallow a car in minutes. The stakes are not a wet shirt anymore. The stakes are everything a family owns, and sometimes the stakes are whether everyone makes it out at all. This is not meant to scare you into panic. Panic is not useful, and it never has been. What actually protects people is something much quieter than panic. It is preparation that happens before anyone is frightened. It is the flashlight with fresh batteries sitting in the same drawer every single year, whether the forecast says calm or chaos. It is knowing your evacuation route without needing to search for it on your phone while the power is already flickering. It is having a plan for your parents, your pets, your important documents, made in a calm afternoon in June, not in a frantic hour in September. NOAA's official update to this outlook comes in August, right before the historical peak of the season, which typically runs from mid-September into October. The stretch of weeks when warm ocean water and calm upper-level winds line up to create the most dangerous conditions of the year. That update will either confirm this quieter pattern, or it will show the season shifting into something more active than expected. Either way, the number on that report will never be the whole story. The whole story is what people do in the weeks after they read it, whether they check their supplies again, whether they know their evacuation route without needing to look it up, whether they treat below average as a reason to prepare less, or as a reminder that averages are made of individual storms and only one of them ever needs your name on it. When that update comes out in August, come back and let's look at it together. Because the number that matters most is never the one printed on the slide, calm and tidy and easy to forget by lunchtime. It's the one that shows up outside your window, in the middle of the night, when the wind changes, and you realize the season everyone called quiet just found you anyway.